And we are recording with Dr. Jerome Corsi on Monday, April 22nd, 2024 at 10:31 a.m. Eastern Time. The last time you were on here was episode 276. So almost 1,200 episodes. And guys, of course, podcast is obviously on Rumble and Spotify, but it's also now being sponsored by Frank Speech, Mike Lindell's company, the video platform. So please go in the description, go check them out, as well as Gold Genesis Group, 1-800-200-GOLD. Please go to the link in the description. Support those that support my podcast, because as you were asking beforehand, how have I grown the show? And it's, well, it was going up, and then it got censored and had to restart. So, I mean, I can go for hours, and I won't, about the importance of not only free speech, but supporting those that support my ability and my right to do that. So, guys, please go in the description and check them out. But most importantly, please go into the description and grab the book, JFK, A Final Analysis. Dr. Corsi, how are you doing, sir?
Tommy, it's great to be back with you. Thank
Yes,
you very
sir.
much.
Yes, sir. And so we were just chatting, 2 minutes ago, about really the only evidence you're ever going to have that's ever going to convince anyone that the narrative was incorrect, or not incorrect, intentionally misleading, is physiological evidence. Because we were just joking beforehand, there's no memo between LBJ and James Juice Angleton that says, let's shoot Jack Kennedy. It's not, they're not stupid. They're evil. They're demons from hell, but they're not stupid. So I'm going to hand it over to you, Dr. Corsi.
Well, I mean, first of all, I think your comment's exactly correct. It's astute that, yeah, there's not going to
No,
be that kind of smoking gun. That's
no.
not going to happen. And yes, they are evil and they are demons from hell. And CIA did kill Jack Kennedy. I mean, all those things are true. And we're going to show you why it's true here today. But the point is that they are masters at creating a Jim Carrey Truman Show, where you think you're watching reality and all you're really watching is the CIA constructed narrative of reality that was designed to mislead you in the first place.
Mm.
And that's what we're going to show today, and we're going to demonstrate today. And I want to start by the cover of the book. So, Tommy, have you given me permission to be able
Yes,
to?
sir. Yes, sir.
Okay, so I'm going to share my screen here,
Yep.
and then I'm going to go. I'm going to go back and forth in sharing the screen because I want to show you various things. So you should be able to see my screen now.
Yep.
And here is the cover of the book, which you can see is the final, and it's the assassination of John F. Kennedy, the final analysis. That's the way you look it up on Amazon, with the assassination of JFK being the title, the final analysis. Now, you can see here we've got a picture of the Zapruder frame. This is the one where Jack Kennedy's just shot in the neck. It was the first shot through the windshield. And the picture here on the right, which is the skull X-ray of JFK, the lateral X-ray, right lateral, through the right side of the head at the top to the bottom, the left-hand side of the head on the table. And what you're looking at, the forehead is in the right part of the picture over here with a blue arrow, and the back of the head is over here with the left arrow. Now, my co-author, David Mantik, who has a PhD in physics and also is a practicing MD, he's been 40 years plus as a radiation oncologist, which means he reads X-rays for cancer patients. Dr. Mantik has seen the JFK skull X-rays. There's only 3 of them left. All the others are gone in the National Archives. And he's taken in an optical densitometer, which is a instrument that you use to measure light coming through an X-ray. I want to show you a picture of what a densitometer looks like here in a minute. Take me a second to find it in the book.
Okay.
But okay, here we go. It's figure 2.5, and I'm going to search to find these figures.
Yep.
The book is heavily illustrated. There's a lot of illustrations in the book because I want you to be able to see everything we're talking about as clearly as I can do it in a printed book that's in black and white. This is a densitometer. It's a little instrument. You put the X-ray into the instrument so that little pinhole in the base of the densitometer casts a beam of light. And the arm, which you see stretched out from the densitometer, comes down on top of the X-ray, and it measures the amount of light getting through the X-ray. Okay, that is done in a logarithmic function. Don't worry about the math. I put all the math in this book in the appendices. If you're inclined with math and you want to see the math, it's all there. But I don't expect most people are going to want to see the math. So we explain it in real world terms. If it's a bone in the body, an X-ray is a negative. So it's going to be dense. It's going to block the X-rays coming through. It's radio optic. It's going to look white on an X-ray. And the range of how much white there can be, 0.05 to 1.5. In other words, 0.05 means virtually no light is getting through at all. 0 would be no light. But if it's nothing there, it's a cavity, it's not dense, all the X-rays get through. It's radiolucent, so it turns black because the silver nitrate in the negative turns black. That can be from 2.0 to 4.0 on a logarithmic scale. Now, that alone don't worry about that, because the truth is when you look at an X-ray, so we're going to go to figure 3.9, most people intuitively can look at an X-ray and know what they're looking at, especially after a little practice.
Mm-hmm.
Because an X-ray is essentially like here. This is an important X-ray, so that you can see here that the bone is clearly white, and where it's black, there's nothing there. Okay, and so this figure 3.9 that I want to show you, which is, I think, extremely important. This is a key figure. To go back to the cover, we're going to say that two things about the X-rays that Dr. Mantic has determined. And this is science, optical density measurements. Number one is all three of the negatives are falsified. These are not the originals. They're copies, and they were all doctored to mask evidence of frontal shots. The X-rays are JFK's X-rays because the teeth in the skull X-rays at the archives from the autopsy match a pre-mortem, before death, skull X-ray that JFK had taken, and it was archived in the JFK Museum in Boston. So these are his X-rays. And so they're all three falsified, and they could not remove evidence of 2 frontal shots and 1 rear shot. And these are the only 3 shots that hit the head. Now, the blue arrow, 1 shot, and I'm also going to describe it in case people are listening to this as an audio only, so you can follow along what we're saying. And we're talking about figure 3.9, page 171 of the book, for those who have a copy of the book. The blue arrow shows a shot that came in at the right forehead, right at the hairline, and the bullet broke up. So the fragments of the bullet went across the top of the head. I'm going to show you those in great detail. And the largest fragment was at the back of the head, which is how a gunshot occurs that breaks up, because the largest fragment has the most weight, it has the most momentum, it travels the farthest. So this is clearly a frontal shot.
Can you say that again? Most weight travels the farthest. Which one?
If you take a look at this picture right here, it's clearer.
Okay.
This is a close-up. So the shot comes in at the forehead, which is on the right here. And these yellow dots are the fragments of the bullet. You see right at the back of the head is the largest of the fragments, and it traveled the farthest. You can see the fragments up front are smaller.
Okay.
In fact, if we go into some of the close-ups of this, you can see that the bullet entered right at the forehead, and almost immediately coming into the skull, there's like dust-like particles. Mm-hmm. It's beginning to break up. There's a lot of dust-like particles right there. And then they all form a line. The bullet has momentum, so it's going back through the head, breaking up in these little dust-like particles. And as it gets further back into the head, that's where it came in, right in that, was right there, came into the head. And the particles you can see are form a line. That's where it entered. They form a line across the top quadrant of the head, the largest fragment in the back, You can see clearly that's larger than these fragments are up closer to the point of entry. And they did not exit. The skull is intact back here. So that is unmistakable evidence of a frontal shot. That's 100%. It's undeniably a frontal shot. Okay, and so the second frontal shot entered at the temporal bone by the right ear, and it forms a keyhole fracture, which I'll show you in a minute. And it exited out the back of Jack Kennedy's head. The back of Jack Kennedy's head was blown away, was gone. Okay, so 2 frontal shots for sure. And the third shot, as seen in the cover, came in at a low angle to the back of the head at the bump in the back of your head. And it blew out a lot of brain matter up here in the front of the head. Okay, now, what this means is none of these shots, the blue and red arrow, came from the front. There's a bullet hole through the windshield. So we got at least 3 shooters. The bullet hole from the windshield came from a shooter who was on the south side of Dealey Plaza. That's the grass across from the grassy knoll. And the triple underpass has a railroad yard above it. And there was a shooter behind that concrete gate or fence. There was a whole fence line there on the railroad yard above the triple underpass. There was a shooter there. There was a shooter, at least one shooter in the grassy knoll, maybe 2, but at least one. And there was a shooter from the low angle behind Jack Kennedy, which is the Daltex building.
Okay.
So there is no shot to the head evident in these x-rays that is from the angle from the Texas School Book Depository 6th floor window. There's no evidence of the head being fractured that way. It's clear that if someone shot from there, they missed, which means that Lee Harvey Oswald was not the lone gun assassin. And this is not disputable. This has been there for 60 years, and the government's been lying about it. Dr. Mantic was able to make these measurements and prove the case. And Dr. Chesser has also reviewed these various findings and said that he's in complete agreement. He's done his own optical density measurements and came to the same conclusion. Okay, now if we take a look at the neck fracture, this is a picture of Jack Kennedy, a drawing with both the bullet hole to the right forehead and the wound to the neck, which were entry wounds. Okay, so you can see that that's how Jack Kennedy would have looked had we had an honest autopsy. And I want to go to this figure 3.9 again, because it you see in the back of the head this white patch, which is impossibly white. Okay, so this is like 6 times, or 6 to 10 times brighter than is possible in a natural X-ray. So it is clearly altered. It's brighter than this bone here, which is the petraeus bone, which is the bone by the ear. That's the brightest bone, the densest bone in the body. Well, you can't have a bone that's more dense than the petraeus bone. It was impossible. Okay, so that's another clear indication that we're dealing with an altered photograph. It mean an altered X-ray. They also put into the X-ray from the front to the back, a 6.5 millimeter object that looks like a bullet. Okay, I'm going to go to frame 2.6, figure 2.6. Oh, sorry.
You're good.
Yeah, well, it typed it into the
into the document.
So when I save it, I won't save the document. Right, close it. 2.6. Okay, this is the front to the back X-ray, and you can see there the blue arrow. There's like a very bright object. Well, they made it look like there was a piece of a Carcano, a Mannlicher Carcano bullet in the back of the head. But again, that X-ray was not seen at the autopsy, and it is on top of some other fragments, but if it had been real, it's not seen in the left to right, the lateral x-rays, but if it had been real, it would have looked this big, would have had to have been this big, because this is how bright it is. Okay, so we go 2.8. It would have been that big if it were there, but on the lateral x-ray, it doesn't show up at all. So whoever tried to impose this bullet on the front to back x-ray made a mistake and forgot to put it in the side x-rays. By the way, the right patch on the right lateral x-ray and the right patch on the left lateral x-ray are not the same. So they were blocking out the back of the head where the blowout was, or drawing attention to the front of the head, which is largely brain missing. And we're going to, by the end of this discussion, I'm going to explain to you that Jack Kennedy's body was brought to the autopsy ahead of the official autopsy, and the doctors did pre-autopsy surgery, but they could not remove bullet trail from the shot to the forehead at the right quadrant of the brain because it was probably a mercury bullet. You can't remove it. And so therefore they got stuck with that being there. They tried to lie about it and say it was part of the shot in the back of the head that killed Kennedy, but that's not the case.
A mercury bullet? Is that a type of bullet, or is that literal the element mercury?
Mercury element is the bullet itself is mercury.
So why couldn't they take that out?
Because it's more like liquid. It's more
got it.
You just can't remove it. You could get a piece of steel and you can get clamps and you can remove the piece of steel.
Got it.
So it can move, but if it's liquid, you can't really scoop it out without being obvious that you damaged a lot of the brain. You would see it. Okay, and so therefore they're stuck with it. And they're different caliber shots. That was probably a lower caliber shot because it didn't break through the head. What hit the temporal bone and blew out the back of the head was clearly a high velocity shot. Probably a copper jacketed bullet did massive damage. The bullet in the back of the head was probably also high velocity, but not quite as high velocity, or not quite as close, which is obvious. The grassy knoll was closer than the Daltex building when the shooting occurred. Now, I want to go to the testimony at Parkland, because when they brought Jack Kennedy into, he was shot in Dealey Plaza, and they were going to go on the Stemmons Freeway to the Trade Mart where they were going to give a speech, but on the way was the Parkland Hospital. Now, when they got to Parkland Hospital, the doctors clearly saw that Jack Kennedy had frontal wounds. They all were in agreement on this because the back of the head was blown away. It was totally gone. And I'm going to explain to you, I'm going to read you a couple of quotations about the back of the head. Okay, so I'm going to go to page 23. And that's way up in the front of the book. Okay, so when we get into the quotations here, this is Jack Kennedy at the autopsy. And I want to go for a quotation here. Sorry about that. I forgot to
What? No, you're good.
Pull them back.
Okay. Oh, I didn't even see anything.
That's good. I'm glad you didn't hear it because the phone was ringing.
No, I didn't hear it.
Oh, that's good because I've got a directional mic and it doesn't pick it up.
Beautiful.
Okay, so you can see this quotation here on my screen. This is Dr. McClellan, who's one of the doctors who was attending Kennedy in Trauma Room 1, and he had a couple quotations here about, and what he says, as I took the position at the head of the table, it's in Trauma Room 1, they bring Kennedy's body into Parkland Hospital. They put him in this Trauma Room 1. They start looking at what the wounds are. A whole group of doctors come in. There's a crowd of people in this room. Dr. McClellan's one of the top doctors at Parkland. And he says, as I took my position at the head of the table that I've already described, first he said, let me read the first quotation. When I took the first look, I could recognize the president, but I didn't see an injury because there was no injury around his face. Okay, that's what one of the nurses said. And then when she looked, she saw at the back of the head was the massive wound. She says, "This is one of the nurses who was attending. Her name is Nurse Audrey Bell." Said, and I asked, "Where's the injury?" And Dr. Perry was standing there. He was doing the tracheotomy, Dr. Malcolm Perry, and he reached up on the president's head and pulled it up a little bit and turned it to the left. There was a gaping hole. That's where the brain and fluids were dripping out of. The wound in the back of JFK's head would have been 3 or 4 inches in diameter that I saw, which is like the size of a baseball. Robert McClellan says, "As I took the position at the head of the table that I've already described to help out with the tracheotomy, I was in such a position that I could very closely examine the head wound, and I noticed that the right posterior portion of the skull had been extremely blasted. The right posterior, that's part at the back, but not at the far back, kind of the top back of the head. It had been shattered completely." Okay, and you can see that in the x-ray that we just looked at. It was all shattered, apparently by the force of the shot, so that the parietal bone, which is the bone on the top of the head, protruded up through the scalp and seemed to be fractured almost along its right posterior half, the back half, as well as some of the occipital bone, which is at the exact back of the head, being fractured in the lateral half, and thus sprung open the bones that I mentioned in such a way that you could actually look down into the skull cavity itself and see that probably a third or so, at least, of the brain tissue, the posterior cerebral tissue, that means all the tissue at the right back of the head, and some of the cerebellar tissue that had been blasted out. That's a part of the brain at the very, very back. There was a large amount of bleeding, which occurred mainly from the large venous channels in the skull, which had been blasted open. So your skull also has veins in it, and they were all bleeding. So what he's describing here is a wound that came in by the ear, furrowed its way through the back of the head, blew with such force it blew the top bone up, fractured all these bones in the back of the head, and blew out a big piece of bone in the back. Now, the doctors knew that with wounds of this nature, Kennedy was not going to survive. There was no chance he was going to survive. And so I'll stop sharing for a minute. And they actually gave a press conference at about 2 hours after Kennedy died, and 8 or 9 times, doctors Malcolm Perry, who did the tracheotomy, and Kemp Clark, these are 2 very senior doctors at the hospital, came out and they said 9 times that President Kennedy was shot from the front. They saw the one wound in the throat. They saw the wound to the back of the head, which was an exit wound. They did not, only one doctor saw the wound in the forehead, and no one saw the wound in Kennedy's back because they didn't turn him over. Their job was to only save his life, not to do an autopsy.
Mm-hmm.
So after about 15 minutes, they tried the tracheotomy. They couldn't get him breathing. They started massaging his heart, and one of the doctors said, "Stop it. You know, this is ridiculous. Kennedy is dead, and so therefore we need to end these procedures. His brain is blown away. His skull has been blown apart. This guy is not. If you could revive him, it wouldn't be worth reviving him. But he's dead." So they only work on him for about 15 minutes, and they hold a press conference. And right after the president's declared dead, Malcolm Perry, who's the press secretary traveling with the Kennedy party, comes out and gives a press conference, a makeshift press conference in one of the classrooms at Parkland Hospital. He points to his right forehead, said, Kennedy died from a bullet wound to the head. They asked where the bullet wound came from, and Kildoff says it came from the right front, which would be the grassy knoll. Okay, so now at Parkland, the wounds are frontal wounds. And the coroner, Dr. Earl Rose, and Justice of the Peace show up in the Parkland Hospital trauma room, and they say, "We're taking custody of the body for the autopsy." The Secret Service had ordered a ceremonial casket, which was brought into trauma room 1, and the Secret Service pulled their weapons. They put Dr. Rose and the justice of the peace up against the wall at gunpoint. The nurses wrap the body in sheets. They put it in the ceremonial casket, and the Secret Service takes the body out. They say, we're going back to Washington. We don't care. There's no federal crime to shoot the president. We know this is a local murder. We don't care. The body's coming with us. They take
it's
it.
It's not a federal crime to shoot the president.
Not a federal crime.
I'm a stickler, but I go by the book.
Yeah, that's right. Well, in fact, if they had let them have the autopsy in Dallas, it would have been done legitimately.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah,
and we would have heard that Kennedy was shot from the front.
Yeah,
and they would have actually found a lot of that have taken honest X-rays. The government could not afford for them to do this. Well, as soon as the limousine got to Parkland Hospital, the Secret Service had a bucket of water, and they're mopping down the back seat.
In the back, yeah.
That they're destroying crime scene. They see that the people are noticing that there's a bullet hole through the front window from the front. Because anybody who knows anything about bullets through plate glass or safety glass knows that it sounds like a firecracker. It like kind of like a pencil mark entry, just a little circle entry. And on the exit inside the limousine, the glass then breaks up, bevels, and spreads out. In fact, at Bethesda, when they were preparing Jack Kennedy for the showing back at the White House, they had a lot of little marks from cut marks on his face from the glass blowing into his face. Again, obvious indication of frontal shot. Now the Secret Service get the casket back to Air Force One. We see all the pictures of the ceremonial casket being loaded in the front of Air Force One, and the airplane takes off. Well, about an hour into the flight, the federal government's got a problem. First of all, one of the photographers for the Associated Press publishes a picture. A guy named Altgens, Altgens. He was standing in front of the limousine when a shot, the first shot, hit Jack Kennedy in the throat. And in the picture, you can see Jack Kennedy holding his arms up to the throat, and behind him is the Texas School Book Depository. It's not in front of him. I'm going to show you a close-up of that picture. I'm going to share my screen again. Okay, here we go. And I'm going to share it. I'm going to look at picture. This is figure 5.4. Okay, so the Altgens picture, which is this one, and you can see it's a close-up. With a red circle that's where the bullet entered the windshield. You can actually see, the flash where it's entering the windshield. It hit Kennedy in the throat. He's got his arms up to his throat, and behind him is the Texas School Book Depository. That's where so when this picture was published, and about an hour into the flight, they captured Lee Harvey Oswald. The Dallas police did, and they announced that Lee Harvey Oswald was the assassin, and that he fired from the 6th floor of the Texas School Book Depository, where they found 3 spent shells, boxes arranged in a sniper's nest on the 6th floor corner window overlooking Dealey Plaza. And they found a rifle, which they first said was a Mauser. Mauser stamped on the trigger mechanism. Any World War II guy would have recognized a Mauser. They changed it to a Mannlicher Carcano after they found that Oswald had identification for Heidel in his wallet, and he'd ordered that mail order. Well, whether he ordered it mail order or not, or somebody did it to frame him, has been a debate. At any rate, now what's the case is it's obvious to the world and to the government that they've got a body with frontal shots, and they've got a setup where the shots all had to come from behind. So they got a problem. Well, the Secret Service knew this right away, because the Secret Service knew that Kennedy was shot from the front. So before the airplane takes off, they take Jack Kennedy's body out of the ceremonial casket in Air Force One and stow it in one of the storage compartments of Air Force One. We'll get to that in a minute, because they're setting up to do pre-autopsy surgery. First, I'm going to show you the sequence of the shots. And for that, I'm going to go over here and I'm going to get a Zapruder film that I have on my drives. So
I've never seen the picture you have up on the screen. I've never seen this before.
well, it's shocking, and there you are. That proves what it is. It's the Alchin 6 photograph. Okay, now I'm going to show you how the shots happened. Oh, by the way, it's very clear that there was a shot through the windshield because again, you can see there's this bright spot. It's reflecting the light.
Mhm. Like
And
a
it's so
spider webbing.
like a spider webbing, and that came from the other side of Dealey Plaza up above the rail yard. That's the shooter over there. Okay, now as we get the sequence of the shots, and I want to do that next, tell you where, how these shots were taken. I'm going to go to the Zapruder film. And so first I'm going to show you Zapruder film frame 313. Okay, we don't need this any longer for now. Okay, here's Zapruder film 313. Okay. Kennedy, the first headshot that hits Kennedy, because first it was the throat. There's a few frames down. A shot hits Kennedy in the back of the head at a low angle. And you can see, if you can see my cursor here, it blew out kind of like head flaps and material out in the front, and you've got all the blood and gore is going up the back shot. Okay, and you're seeing that people are reacting to the shooting, and officers are seeing the shooting. This all happens in about 6 seconds. And then at about 3:30, let me find the exact one here, 3:31, which is about 2 seconds later. Okay, so the first shot hits the back of the head. I move him over here so you can see it. Put that one over here. Okay, and this is the first shot right here. Hits, everything's going out the front of the head. You can see that clearly. And then 2 seconds later, again, you can see now the whole right side of Kennedy's head explodes. Okay, that's different. That part is intact in 313. By 331, the shot, so the back shot hits first, then the shot that hits the side of the head and blows out the back of the head hits next. And it's a couple seconds later. Now at this shot, 331 shot, what you've got is you've got Clint Hill running to the car. So let's do a couple seconds later, 343. Clint Hill is coming up. He's reaching the back handrail. You can see Jack Kennedy has been shot back into the left. That's where the back into the left goes.
Yeah.
So there's first a little movement of the head forward. There's all this blood coming out. And then the shot to the side of the head throws him violently to the left. And you can see it. Clint Hill's running. Clint Hill gets splattered with Jack Kennedy's blood, brain, skull, everything. All this mess comes on him. And also on this motorcycle officer to the inboard motorcycle on the left of the limousine. He gets splattered with blood, etc. And it's clearly a shot from the grassy knoll because all the motion, all the blood, everything gore is all going back into the left from the front of the car. And that's obvious now. Jackie Kennedy starts climbing out. So on frame 348, she's coming out of the car. You can see her coming out of the car. Okay, and she's by frame 381, it's clear that she's reaching for something. Okay, so here's 381. She's reaching for something on the back of the car to the left. She's reaching for a piece of his brain. And Clint Hill's there and he's trying to help her. And when she gets it by 388, she's going back in the car. She got what she wanted. She's going back in. She picks something up. She's going back in. Okay, and again, affirming that everything was shot from the front. And what you can see on all these and it's not as apparent. This one I'm going to show you next is a little bit difficult to see, but so I'm finished showing these frames right now. Those are all done.
Mhm.
You can see the action of the shooting. I don't know exactly when the one to the forehead occurred. It probably occurred simultaneously with the shot that hit on the ear and blew the back of the head out. And it just depends on where Jack Kennedy was angled. It could have come from the other side, the south side of Dealey Plaza, the gunman up above Dealey Plaza, the railroad yard. It could have been a second shooter on the, we don't know. Well, all you can tell from the skull is the shots and a general idea of where they came from. In other words, a shot like this, you know, it comes from the front. Both the red arrow and the blue arrow are both frontal shots. But whether they were both from the grassy knoll or one of the headshots, like the blue arrow, was from the other side of the grassy knoll, the south side by the railroad yard, you can't tell for sure. And that doesn't really affect the narrative at all. But I want to show you what Jackie Kennedy did when she got back in the car, which she did in figure, I'm going to go to now 4.17. Okay, so you can't see it very clearly, but this is Jack Kennedy sitting up. You can see it a little bit better in this picture. You can see that's Kennedy sitting up. That's his face. So Jackie puts his head back together and tries to get him sit up like he's going to be all fixed. He's going to put it all back together.
Yeah.
Well, this is clearly she's going in a blackout. It's a panic reaction. Yeah. But you can also see the blowout at the back of his head. It's gone. And they were not able to patch this. Many of the others, they patched it. They put a sloppy patch to block out the blowout at the back of the head. That's his ear, face. That's Nellie Connolly. Okay, and so there's this large bleeding hole right there. And that's the blowout, and that's where it came from. Okay, now I want to cover one more thing on the fragment from the back of his head, which is called the Harper fragment. Go to figure 4.23. Harper fragment looks like a trapezoid. It's like this odd shape. This is blown out of the back of the head, and it lands on the lawn you can see on the left side of the limousine. In other words, the south side of Dealey Plaza. But it has evidence of a entrance wound right here at the corner, and there's metal there. So you can tell that there was the Harper fragment, which was found by Billy Harper. It's named after the person who found it. It was evidence of both a frontal shot to the back of the head and a shot since it was blown out, it was a shot. It also witnesses the shot to the right temple from the front of the head. The Harper fragment is missing. It's gone. But there were pictures taken of it at the time. And then you can see exactly, is another point of what it looks like. And the smear where the circle is, that's where the metal is and where the bullet entrance was. This is a piece of occipital bone from the back of the head. And here's a drawing of where it fits in the back of the head. You can see where the 6.5 millimeter object was placed. There's the metallic smear showing the entrance wound. So the wound that entered the head entered it right above the bump at the back of the head, a little to the right, which would have positioned it pretty well with the Daltex building from behind. And all these breaking up of, all of the bone fractures and the bone flap from the back shot. So this shot kind of hit the head here and went out this way. And you can tell that the two frontal shots kind of crisscrossed each other. I have an image of that if I can find it here quickly, because the shot at the right quadrant of the head was at a higher angle than the shot from the temporal shot. And so the lead from the blue arrow shot to the forehead remained there in the head, even though much of the head was blown out. So I'm going to go to figure 4.5 and show you how these shots, and see what makes all this so convincing is this is forensic evidence. It's in the x-rays. This is indisputable. The forehead shot went higher above where the shot to the temple occurred. So the temple shot blew out all this part of the brain, but it didn't blow out the part of the brain where the forehead shot occurred. That's why we can see that trail of bullets that didn't exit. So you've obviously got one bullet trail from a frontal shot. Then you've got the, physiological damage from the shot that entered at an oblique angle, which caused that keyhole entry wound, not a puncture entry wound. A straight on shot would be more like a circle direct entry, whereas an oblique shot, like a tangential shot, enters with this keyhole fracture that fractures the bone ahead and has a different fracture pattern of the head. Why there were so many fractures back here, the back of the head when it blew out. You're looking down into the skull here, okay, to see where these two paths are. Okay, now, Tommy, is this all clear to you so far?
Yes, sir.
Pretty shocking, isn't it? Well, you're going to get more shocked here now.
It's something that like you always suspect, but no, you're actually seeing it, and it's just you're like, yeah, the CIA did it, but then like the more you kind of look at this, you start to get that kind of sickly, like, the CIA did it, and it's like saying it versus feel. It's like talking about 9/11 versus watching. I was watching a video the other night of it, and you're just watching, and you're like, that actually happened, like that.
Yes.
It's you've just. I was 11 when it happened. It's been 23 years. You talk about it so much, it kind of loses its value, and then you just watch like a video with no voices of like the buildings coming down. You're like, oh, that happened, and it's kind of the same feeling with this. Is like, yeah, the CIA did it, but the more you're looking at it, you're like, the CIA killed the president,
The CIA killed the
and it
president.
just dawns. It's a slow dawning. Like, it's not; those aren't just words strung together. It's a reality.
It's a sickening feeling.
Yeah. And then, all right, well, why is that important? It was 61 years ago. Well, then what else have they done?
Yeah, and since this is the day the coup d'etat occurred, where the deep state or the counter state, the deep state took over the control of the government and has been running it ever since. So every president we've had since then can be looked at as a product of the deep state, a puppet of the deep state, who was selected by the deep state and did the deep state's bidding, with the possible exception of Donald Trump.
Yeah.
Which is why they hate him so much.
Yeah.
Okay, so now the Air Force One lands about 6 o'clock at Andrews Air Force Base, and you see that Bobby Kennedy runs up into the stairs in the front of the airplane, and then they're offloading the casket at the back of the airplane. They've got a gray Navy ambulance pulled up to Air Force One. Two drivers who were driving the limousine in Dallas, named Greer at the wheel, and Kellerman, who had the shotgun position in the front seat, were also driving the ambulance. The body and the hearse are downloaded into the casket, except there's no body. The casket is empty of the body, and nobody knows that at the time. It gets loaded in. Jackie and Bobby get in the hearse. This is an ambulance, not a hearse, in the ambulance, and it drives off to Bethesda. Lyndon Johnson gives a speech for a couple minutes. The lights go off. A helicopter is waiting behind Air Force One, and they open the compartment where they got Jack Kennedy's body, and they load it into the helicopter, and they fly it to Bethesda. At 6:35 p.m., and this is the same evening, November 22nd, 1963, which is an hour and a half before the official autopsy, the body arrives at the morgue at Bethesda on the loading dock. A black ambulance pulls up and offloads a casket where the Navy corpsmen take constitute a working party to take the casket from the helicopter to bring it into the morgue. The casket is a metallic pinkish gray shipping casket, like Vietnam, and or like the caskets they use now to bring military or killed back. And when these Navy corpsmen, and this guy Boagian records in his duty notes The time is 6:35 p.m. for the arrival of the shipping casket, the black hearse. When they open it up, they see a body bag, a black body bag like Vietnam. They unzip it, and Kennedy's body is naked except for a towel around his head. That's not how the body left Parkland. It left Parkland in a ceremonial casket wrapped in sheets. Now, what Paul O'Connor says, he's one of the corpsmen who actually was involved in bringing this shipping casket into the morgue and opening it, says Paul O'Connor was interviewed by a guy named William Matson-Law, who did a lot of interviewing of the Navy personnel. Paul O'Connor says the back of the morgue opened up, and a crew of hospital corpsmen and a higher ranking corpsman, Dennis David, brought in a plain pinkish gray, what I call a shipping casket. It was not ornate. It was not damaged. It was just a pinkish gray casket. They brought it into the morgue and set it up. We had two tables in the morgue, autopsy tables. They were back to front. They weren't side by side. They were back to front. They brought it up front where we were. And at that time, we opened up the coffin. Inside was a body bag. So William Matson-Law says, now you're sure there was a body bag. Paul O'Connor, absolutely sure there was a body bag. We unzipped it quickly. Inside was a nude body with a bloody sheet wrapped around the head of the body. We lifted the body onto the morgue, onto the table. All right, now, what happens is that the two doctors who are doing the autopsy, who are Humes and Boswell, come into the morgue. There's no one else in the morgue except a few corpsmen, and they get ready to perform pre-autopsy surgery. What they do is they take this wounded JFK's forehead and they do incisions in it, and they make it look like it was an exit wound, like there's like this big wing thing popping out of the front of the head as if it were a blowout. And they also take a saw and they remove the top of JFK's skull. They take the parietal bone, the bone on the top of the skull, they saw it off and remove it. And they get down inside the brain and they start looking for metal to remove any metal. So I'm going to show you what JFK's head looks like after they get finished with it. This is figure 6.6 type figure. Okay, and it's pretty shocking. What I'm going to show you here at this next thing as I can find it, it's numbered a little bit different in the final version. Let me see where I'm at. Okay, so I go forward here. Yes. That's what it looks like. So you can see the parietal bone, the bone is gone from the top of his head. If we zoom in on this, you can see it even better. That's the mess of the head.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, that's pre-autopsy surgery. Jack Kennedy's head is on a brace. That brace is not in the autopsy table where the gallery is going to come. But it's clearly Jack Kennedy's head. And I think I've even got a color picture of it, which is a little bit more horrifying.
Yeah, I've seen these.
That's where it's the occipital bone. That's where, yeah, I'm sure these have been shown. And I'm going to put this a little bit lower resolution. You can see how this wing, the front is made into kind of like a incised wing blowout. Back of the head's a mess. That's not how Kennedy looked leaving Parkland. It wasn't like this at all. Okay, in fact, if we go to how it looked at Parkland compared to how it looked at the autopsy, and I've got a picture of that here in the book too. Let me just find that. I'll show it to you. Are we okay in time? Got
Yes,
a couple
sir.
more. Okay, you let me know when we're running out.
Yep.
Okay, so if we continue, I want to show you here. So okay, so let's figure 1.4. Okay, so you have this is Dr. Crenshaw, who's saying he's the one who saw the bullet hole in the right front in Parkland. And you can see how they did this wing incision to obscure it. But you can see all the blood and gore because that's a color picture. Jack's Kennedy's head does not look like that at Parkland. And we have the descriptions of the doctors. So the problem of the having to convert frontal wounds into wounds from the back demanded that the CIA, the Secret Service, the military industrial complex find a way to get Kennedy's body to the morgue early before the official autopsy, and they get the doctors to perform pre-autopsy surgery on the head to alter the physical wounds. So now you've got clearly indication this is a coup d'etat because the government who is control of the body is actively altering the wounds and destroying the evidence of back shots, which was not the case. Okay, there was a back shot, but there was two frontal shots which are now being obliterated. Now, if we go back into the back, I wanted to show you there were actually 3 casket entries. This became like a charade. So finally, that's the autopsy sketch. That's what the room looked like. They're numbered a little bit different in my working file than they were in the final book, which takes a minute to adjust to.
You're good.
But the point is that casket entry number 3, I'll just do casket entry number 3. Okay, it's number 1. So number 1, shipping casket at 6:35. Okay, at 7:17, what happens is that the Navy ambulance that Kellerman and Greer are driving pulls up in front of the Bethesda. And Jackie and Bobby get out of the limousine, out of the ambulance, and go into Bethesda, the front door, and they go to the VIP lounge. Now, Kellerman and Greer are sitting outside. They don't know where the morgue is at Bethesda. Nobody told them. So they're sitting there. And 2 FBI agents, Siebert and O'Neill, who have been assigned to witness the autopsy, show up, and they see this Navy ambulance in front of Bethesda. And Siebert and O'Neill say to Greer, who's driving, Kellerman had already gone inside the building to try to find the morgue. And Kellerman, so Siebert and O'Neill say to Greer, we know where the morgue is because we show up here every year for our FBI physicals. So they drive around, they lead Greer to the back of the morgue, the entry loading dock. And so the 4 of them, Siebert, O'Neill, Kellerman, and Greer, take the heavy ceremonial casket that's empty out of the Navy ambulance, and they bring it into the anteroom of the morgue. They don't actually get into the morgue, and they're told by the Navy personnel that they have to leave. That the preparations are going on inside. They can't come in. Okay, so the Navy corpsmen get that casket brought inside after Siebert and O'Neill, Kellerman, and Greer go off. That's the second casket entry. Now, there's a ceremonial team that there's a ceremonial team. This is the 3rd casket entry at the time the autopsy stops. There's a ceremonial team of, honor guard, which are the, Air Force, Navy, and Marines, Army, Air Force, Navy, and Marines, each with uniformed formal officers who are going to accompany the casket. They also arrive at Andrews Air Force Base and are driving to go to Bethesda. But Admiral Galloway, who was a commander at the Bethesda Naval Hospital, goes and gets a Navy gray ambulance, and he goes out, finds this casket team, and he leads them in a wild goose chase through Washington. These guys are trying to track down this. They think that that's the ambulance that left Andrews Air Force Base with Jackie and Bobby in the ceremonial casket. It's just empty. He's just leading them as a decoy, trying to waste time. So finally, the honor guard Galloway gets them to the morgue. The honor guard goes into the back of the morgue, and they say, "Where's the casket?" And now Jack Kennedy's body is back in the casket, the ceremonial casket, and the honor guard walk it into the gallery at 8 o'clock. And the gallery's all there. Dr. Humes opens the ceremonial casket, takes Jack Kennedy's body out, and puts it on the table, and everybody gasps, because anybody who knows anything about surgery knows that somebody operated on this head. The parietal bone's gone. That was not blown away at Park and Igdala and Dealey Plaza. Nobody saw that. And these guys who know autopsies, there should be a medical team here watching this, among others, knows that had to be sawed off and removed. That's how you do an autopsy. You basically saw this body and chop this body a piece to get the internal organs and everything else. Autopsy is not a particularly pleasant thing to observe or do. At any rate, they gasp. And so Siebert and O'Neill, in their 302 report, the two FBI agents, in their after-action report of observing the autopsy, say that when the body was brought out of the casket by Humes and Boswell, there was pre-autopsy surgery to the head. Now, that had to be what Humes said. These are not, Siebert and O'Neill are not medically trained. They're just writing down what's happening. But it is in their report that it was announced at the autopsy that there was pre-autopsy surgery to the head. Well, that can't be, because now you're looking at an altered body. And that's clear evidence of fraud. And by the way, there were generals at the autopsy, including Curtis LeMay, who characteristically smoked a cigar. He firebombed Germany. He headed the strategic bombing of Japan, firebombed Japan, dropped 2 nuclear weapons on it, wanted to go to war in the Cuban Missile Crisis. He wanted to invade Cuba. He wanted to go to nuclear war with Russia. He said that we could beat Russia. We had tactical nuclear advantage. We should do it now. The Soviet Union. He was deeply disappointed when Kennedy wouldn't allow him to do it. Kennedy had signed an order just a few days earlier, a national security memorandum saying we were going to pull out of Vietnam. He set a schedule to get the observers and the advisors out of there. And at the autopsy, the generals were giving orders as to what the doctors could and could not do. And Curtis LeMay refused to put out a cigar. He was blowing it in the face of anybody, blowing smoke in the face of anybody who asked him to put the cigar out. And so he was obviously there enjoying himself at the autopsy. Now, all these events which we're describing in this book, and you can see the book is a 564-page book, got about 1,000 footnotes in it. Tommy, you've got a copy, right?
Yes, sir.
You've been able to look at it?
Yes, sir.
I tried to write this with Dr. Mantik. Dr. Mantik's been publishing this research for over 30 years, and he's very well known in the JFK community. But his writing is highly technical and mathematical, so the normal readers can't read it. So I tried to write this book so anybody could read it.
You're the translator.
And I know the case is my second book on Kennedy's assassination. I know the literature, I know the work. The primary research that constitutes the core of this book was Dr. Mantik's, and we wrote the book in the first person with him telling the story of, what he learned, how he learned it, how he came about these revelations, how he's documented it. It's been in many documentaries. It was in the most recent, Dr. Mantik was in the most recent Oliver Stone documentary, JFK Revisited, the longer version of it as well, Through the Looking Glass and JFK Revisited. And he's well known, but now with this book, it's a game changer in that this is hard forensic evidence that JFK was shot twice from the front, which is hard forensic evidence that this entire assassination was a government-pulled operation. During the Bethesda autopsy, the doctors from Bethesda were calling the doctors from Parkland all night long, threatening them. You didn't see the back wound. Well, the doctor said it wasn't our job to see the back wound. The coroner was there. He was going to do the autopsy. We tried to save his life. When we couldn't save his life, we were done. We didn't examine the body. That was next. So the Bethesda said, well, you didn't know there was a back wound. And the back wound might see, there was another problem the government had. They found 3 shells in the setup, setting Oswald up at the 6th floor of the Texas School Book Depository. But an observer named James Tague, who was standing the south side of Dealey Plaza, right at the triple underpass, parked his truck there and stood there to watch the motorcade. He got nicked in the cheek by a bullet that missed. So now the government has only 2 shots to do all this damage to Kennedy's head and the damage to Connolly, who was sitting in the jump seat. Connolly said he was hit by a separate bullet. But if Oswald was the lone gun shooter, there couldn't have been that many shots fired, because you now have, 1 shot that hit Kennedy, 1 shot in the neck or throat, and the shot that hit Connolly. So you'd have to have at least 3.
So it was a full auto belt fed Carcano.
Yeah, and the Carcano, by the way, didn't work very well at the time. It was made. It was not an accurate weapon, and it had a misaligned scope. So what the doctors decided, they started this single bullet theory, is they said there was only 1 shot to Kennedy, and it hit the back of his head at a high angle, and it did all this damage and blew out the front, and that was it. No other shots to the head. They eliminated all the debris from the left. They eliminated everything the doctors saw from Parkland. They said the doctors had to be wrong. And the doctors at Bethesda told the doctors at Parkland that if they didn't change their story from the press conference of frontal wounds, they were all going to be brought before medical certification committees, and they were going to lose their license to practice medicine. Okay, so they were threatened, and they gave in to the pressure. It took 4 writings of the autopsy before Humes and Boswell got it correct for the government. Actually, some of the first autopsy notes were burned by James Humes in his fireplace. So the original autopsy records were destroyed, and he admitted to that. And they came up, they said, well, 1 shot hit Jack Kennedy in the back of the head, and 1 shot hit him in the back, came out the neck, and then hit Connolly in the ribs, broke his ribs. It went into Connolly's arm, broke his radial bone of his arm, which is a big bone, and ended up in his left knee. Well, that's the single bullet or the magic bullet theory, zigzagging around, and it's pristine. Committee Exhibit 399. Well, it's impossible, both from the physics of shooting, or from the physics of how a bullet gets broken up or misshapen by hitting bone. It's a fantasy. But the government was stuck with only, their evidence plant left them only 2 shots. So they had to now, the problem with this whole deal was the government's evidence didn't fit together, because the body wasn't shot just from behind. It wasn't shot from the 6th floor of the Texas School Book Depository. And the only way the government could make its story stick was to threaten the doctors at Parkland to alter the evidence, including the best evidence, which is Jack Kennedy's body. And this has been fully documented. And so David Bellin in the book, Best Evidence, was onto this 30 years ago. But what we have today that makes this book with Mantic unique is that finally the public can understand what, like CSI information, crime scene investigation. It's the forensics. And anyone's watched CSI on TV, and I think millions of people have watched CSI, and they realize that it's the CSI that solves crimes, because you've got the physical evidence, not the altered evidence or the substituted evidence or the confusing evidence or the debatable evidence or debatable eyewitnesses. Those don't settle a case. But the x-rays, that they were altered, means the government was destroying evidence. It's evidence of a conspiracy to the government's part. That the frontal shots can still be seen in the x-rays and are corroborated by the Zapruder film and the testimony given at the time. I can read you what Clint Hill said about climbing onto the back of that car. In fact, I'm going to do that. It was a very important statement that he said. He said, Okay, Clint Hill wrote uh, the book that he published on this. He said, as I approached the vehicle, Jack Kennedy's limousine, there was a third shot. So last shot, it hit the president in the head, the upper right rear of the right ear, causing a gaping hole in his head, the back of his head, which caused brain matter, blood, and bone fragments to spew forth out over the car, over myself, climbing up in the left-hand grab in the back of the limousine. At that point, Mrs. Kennedy came up out of the back seat and onto the trunk of the car. She was trying to retrieve something that had gone off to the right rear, off the right rear. Okay, so it's coming off, hitting on the left. Okay, and the right rear of the limousine that she's reaching out to, which is actually the left rear, but as she's reaching, going backwards, it's her right rear. She did not know I was there. At that point, I grabbed Mrs. Kennedy, put her back, and put her in the back seat. The president fell over onto her lap to his left. Well, he fell hard left as soon as he was shot. And when she got back in, she put him on his lap, his head on her lap. Clint Hill continued. The right side of his head was exposed. I could see his eyes were fixed. There was a hole in the upper right rear of his head, about the size of my palm. That's the back right head, was blown out from the shot to the temple. Most of the gray matter in that area had been removed and was scattered throughout the entire car, including on Mrs. Kennedy. I turned and gave the follow car crew the thumbs down, indicating that we were in a very dire situation. The driver accelerated. He got up to the lead car, which was driven by Chief Curry, the Dallas chief of police. So the evidence is absolutely clear that the shot, two frontal shots, means that the government's been lying for 60 years. It was a coup d'etat. It involves the CIA. Within minutes after the assassination, the Dallas police put out an all-point bulletin that precisely physically described Lee Harvey Oswald. A whole dossier on Lee Harvey Oswald was circulated to the press internationally. The government had created this narrative, lone gun, disgruntled, partly Marxist, had worked with the Free Cuba, the committee, had defected to Russia, lone nut gun assailant. And that evening, while the autopsy was going on at Bethesda, the Dallas police were announcing to the press, we're 100% certain that Oswald was the killer. That he acted alone. We have the rifle. Oswald failed the paraffin test.
Mm-hmm. The gunpowder
test. He didn't fire any weapons that day. So you've got a whole Jim Carrey, movie going on, Truman Show. And that what we're watching is the play the government has written in advance for us to see. And it's being scripted by the CIA. These have got to be it doesn't matter who the killers were, their names. These had to be top professionals. First of all, you're shooting at the president. And by the way, the curb had been painted yellow in the kill zone. The reason there was no shot from the 6th floor window, if that's where Oswald had been, he had a shot straight down on Kennedy. When Kennedy turned the car, limousine turned from Houston Street to come onto Elm Street. You don't wait until Kennedy is going further down Elm Street at about a 3-degree declining angle on a twisting road, shooting at him through or above a tree. I mean, this is not an arcade game. You don't get points for difficulty of shot. If you're trying to kill the president, you take your best shot. But once Kennedy made that turn, he had to go through the triple underpass because it was the only way out, which means there was a kill zone that you could triangulate. The shooters had to be top professional. Someone shot through the front window, went between two Secret Service agents, didn't hit Mrs. Kennedy, hit Kennedy in the throat. The shot to the side of the head was closer in a grassy knoll, but it didn't hit Mrs. Kennedy. The same with the shot in the back. This is a very difficult shot, winding down, car moving, going down, even if it was moving slowly. You have to take into account, the angle of drop, got to take the twist. You've got to adjust your rifle to know where to shoot, how to aim so that the shot gets at the right point. Going to be some time before that bullet gets there, even if it's almost instantaneous. Takes a little bit of time. So the shot has to be calculated. These were professional shooters. To get 3 headshots in this difficulty of a shot with the president required expert shooting, and probably trained expert shooting, team shooting. 1-100, 2-100, 3-100, everybody shoots. 1-100, 2-100, 3-1, everybody shoots. And so therefore, 3 shots or 6 shots sound like one, especially in Dealey Plaza, which is an echo chamber. And the Warren Commission, which now involves Department of Justice, it involves the Supreme Court Justice, they only take into account evidence which supports the government narrative. And in the end of the book, the last of many appendices is a CIA document written in 1967 that says the official policy of the CIA that anybody who objects to the Warren Commission conclusion Lee Harvey Oswald was the lone gun assassin is to have a psychological operation, PSYOP, run on them to muddy up their evidence and to attack them personally to destroy their credibility. So the CIA has been involved in the cover-up for 60 years plus, and not all the documents are released yet today.
And then, and lastly, I would say, and I'm with you. I think we're probably all on the same opinion that the U.S. government did it. But let's just go one step further and be as conservative as humanly possible and only use physical evidence, right? So despite all the incentives, all the top people in the deep state hate him, let's just remove all of that. The evidence shows that it's not what the Warren Commission said. So whether it's the U.S. government, whether it's Moscow, whether it's Brazil or Little Green Men, regardless of that, even though I think we're all on the same page, it was the CIA. Let's just remove that. The fact that the physical evidence shows that it's not what the Warren Commission says is already all you need. Something's afoot.
Then, Tommy, the next step you go is you say the U.S. government had control of the body from the moment of the shooting, didn't let go of it. The U.S. government had control of the autopsy. U.S. government had control of the x-rays. U.S. government had control of all the evidence. U.S. government had control of the Warren Commission. So the party that was involved
had the most control and the most to gain.
And no one else could have altered this evidence.
Sure.
And Lee Harvey Oswald could not have magically jumped to the front of the limousine and done a couple of shots and, catapulted himself back up to the 6th floor to do another shot. I mean, it's ridiculous.
Yeah.
But so therefore, this forensic evidence destroys the government case, which is why the mainstream media will not cover this book, because it will prove to the American people that the mainstream media have been in on the act as a corporate-controlled, CIA-controlled media that for 60 years have been reporting what the government wants. And now what does the government want? What does this deep state want? They want perpetual war.
Yeah.
So we do 35 or 40 billion more to Ukraine, which was just done, and everybody applauds, we're saving Ukraine from the... No, you're stealing the money. You're providing money for the arms manufacturers and arms dealers to make a fortune. You're funding death, and you're creating war in order to have this insanity of the disillusion, the uncertainty, the breakup of traditional standards, the emergency situations, where the government can get more power. The government's going to protect us. No, the government's not going to protect you. The government's going to architect an assassination to shock you and then run a narrative which is a lie in order to gain power, conduct wars and make money, kill people. And they're now in the open doing this. How can you have the deep state or the counter state It's what they would call it in terms of political warfare. We are in World War III in terms of counterintelligence work. This is World War III being conducted, where our traditional values are being destroyed. There's perpetual war. And we even have a president that the special counsel says is suffering from such senior mental dementia that he cannot be prosecuted for crimes regarding the handling and use of classified documents, which Joe Biden shared with his biographer as vice president. Now, how can you have the government's special prosecutor declaring that Biden is suffering from senior dementia, yet he's running the country? Well, as Putin says, he's not running the country. But the deep state has exactly what they want. They've got a figurehead, while they in behind are the demons constructing realities that the press puppets to us as the truth. Okay, and the truth is destructive truth. There are no permanent values. Men can have babies. Transgenders can play women's sports. And all of this is destructive, and it's intended to destroy. We're in the final stages of a political warfare which is designed to destroy the traditional values of the American people, to destroy the economy, destroy the middle class, and ultimately prepare the destruction of everything productive for this small group to take over. Now, the truth is that before World War II, and we've got Allen Dulles, who was head of the CIA under Eisenhower, and John Foster Dulles, head of the State Department. So at the core of this, you've got the State Department working with the CIA. And before World War II, Allen Dulles, John Foster Dulles, Prescott Bush, the father of George H.W. Bush, Brown Brothers Harriman. Harriman was a billionaire on railroads, and one of the early, multi-rich, and the bankers funded. Brown Brothers Harriman on Wall Street. Wall Street funded Hitler. We funded Hitler.
Yeah.
And in fact, George H.W. Bush was running. George Prescott Bush, father of George H.W. Bush, was running Union Bank, a Nazi bank in the United States that FDR closed down after Pearl Harbor. Okay, now why were we funding Hitler? Because Hitler's idea, socialists fighting the communists, they had different. Communists believed there should be no private property. You'll own nothing and everybody will be happy. But the National Socialists thought a small self-appointed oligarchy, the Nazis, should control everything by means of psychological operations and work with the multinational corporations with interlocking directorates, which, Allen Dulles and John Foster Dulles and Prescott Bush were arranging by interlocking directorates with U.S. Steel and Krupp in Germany. So these were really one company. They would control all the resources of the world, depopulate with wars and other destructions. But in the meantime, the population would get some goodies. They'd have some free medical care from the government. They could buy cheap cars. They could get their Volkswagens, and they could drive them on autobahns that the government built. And occasionally you might get a government vacation. So therefore, the population was held in check by government handouts until the government was ready to depopulate. Then you have World War III, World War II, World War I. And these series of wars are aimed at destroying God, destroying families, destroying traditional values, and creating for this little mad satanic oligarchy their utopia on earth, where they and their machines can do all the production and can control the world. It's an insane reality, but the JFK case unlocks the door to asking all these questions. How many more lies are we being told? How many bad diseases are going to be made out of bad flus? How many vaccines are going to be constructed that don't prevent you from getting the disease? How much depopulation is going on now in the world? If we can't use hydrocarbon fuels, billions will die. So you begin to see the JFK case, the assassination, I say, is the Rosetta Stone to understand called the military industrial complex have taken over worldwide and are operating covertly to create their totalitarian future, which we're being architected into in a Truman Show, in which we're not allowed to consent or to object.
Mm.
And you get there by the fact that the forensic evidence in the JFK case is indisputable proof that he was shot from the front. That's all you need to know that we've been lied to for 61 years and counting, and we don't yet have all the documents.
Beautifully said. And we gotta wrap it up. I would love to. I'm gonna email you after this. I'd love to schedule another one sooner than later and kind of pick up from this point and move forward. And I
Okay,
think
let's do it.
because the JFK piece is but a tiny foundational piece, and the big picture. I mean, and you feel crazy saying it out loud, but it is what it is. It's an anti-life, anti-carbon cycle, anti-biology, satanic by default, technocratic elite. It feels like something somebody on the sidewalk would be screaming, but the reality is it's what it is. And I think it was Voltaire said, I think those who can convince you of absurdities can make you commit atrocities, and that's where we're going. But with that, Dr. Corsi, let's wrap this one up. Thank you so much for your time, sir. Guys, please go in the description. Please go buy the book. I do have the link in there, and I have your number now, so I'm going to text you right after this, and let's schedule another one.
Deal. Let's do it.
Dr. Corsi, thank you so much for your time, sir. That was absolutely A plus, 10 out of 10 presentation.
Thank you, Tommy. In the end, God always wins. God will win here too.
Always does, always has. And anything other than that is an illusion. Dr. Corsi, thank you so much, sir. Guys, thank you so much for watching. Please go grab the book. Till next time, much love, everybody. God bless.